You'll notice I'm not alone in the studio today. I got the lovely Miss Annie McKee back. She's Mississippi #1 storyteller in my book.
Oh, thank you.
And I can't believe it's been a year since you've been here. And that means that Meridian's birthday is just around the corner.
Right.
Which is September. Listen to me. February the 10th and 1860. So how old does that make Meridian this year?
Somebody asked me that yesterday. I'm not good with math. But we came up with 163.
163. Well, yeah, I think you did pretty good with math. So take me back 163 years ago. What was Meridian like, or what was going on then?
It was Choctaw Nation prior to statehood. And actually, this area where we are right here was the Choctaw Nation. And a little while ago, when I passed over the Pearl River coming to your station, I thought, I think I can see Choctaws out there, and the missionaries, the French traders, they were all there on all of the rivers. But Pearl always just brings me closer to that time. I'm a little weird. I'm a storyteller.
Well, I don't think you're strange. I think that, though, because you live so much of your life in these stories and researching the history of Mississippi and writing your books and putting together your many events, you wouldn't but sort of see those scenes play out because it was history. It really happened.
It really happened, and that's what we're doing in Meridian. Well, in 1854, Meridian, the railroads had started coming through, the G&O and Ohio, and the speculators ran in and bought land, and we tell that story. We call it the feuding founders. One day, someone bought 80 acres from the first settler there, Mr. McLemore, and the next day, this other guy bought 80 acres, and then the fight began. They were so competitive. They would lay out their streets, mark them, stake them out, and the next morning someone had moved it around. I mean, it's really a story.
And you didn't have your spy cameras and your, catch it on video or any of that. So if you weren't up looking at it, there's a lot of mischievous things that could happen.
That's right. And so
overnight.
I say, as you're driving the streets of Meridian, if you come to a crazy intersection or something that looks weird, you've met one of the founders, Mr. Ball and Mr. Ragsdale, because they would not give up. That's the way, and eventually that's just the way it's all laid out.
I was going to say, did one ever exceed at getting more than the other, or did they finally just both wave a white flag and develop Meridian together?
I'm going to say it was even. One started the post office and a country store, and the other guy opened up a tavern, just in case somebody needed a drink. And eventually he opened up a hotel because as the rails came through, the workers needed somewhere to live, and so he opened a hotel and a tavern, and eventually people came in. Even our settler, Mr. McLemore, gave away some land because he wanted good, wholesome families to come with children, so churches could start and schools, and with that land he gave away, and that worked. It really did work. So that's how we were in 1854.
How did Meridian get its name? Like when you think about 1860, I guess February 10th of 1860 is when it was Meridian's birthday. So much other had to happen prior to that, as you were talking about, with the years leading up. At what point back then was it like, okay, let's make this official? This is a town. Like, how does that happen?
Well, enter Mr. Ball and Mr. Ragsdale again. Mr. Ragsdale suggested Ragsdale City. And Mr. Ball...
That's a terrible name.
Awful. Mr. Ball said, well, Baldwin. It should be Baldwin. Now, the original name of the little settlement was Siwash Junction, which is Choctaw for mighty waters. But anyway, so the railroad just got fed up with it all and said, we're naming it, and it's Meridian. So there you go.
What was the one prior there that was beautiful? That's the Choctaw. So say it again. Sawashi Junction.
Yeah.
Could you imagine the weatherman having to say that during like tornado? I mean, you always learn about a new small community whenever there's a weather event for sure. But definitely that one would have gotten some form of nickname or shortened down, which Meridian actually did. Many know it as the Queen City.
The Queen City.
How many years in Meridian's development did the Queen City kind of get it, or did Meridian get the tag of Queen City?
Well, it was in 1870 when there was a race between two railroad lines. And one was named the Queen, and the other was named the Crescent, these two trains. And eventually, I mean, they went through a lot of miles, but the Queen won, and so we became the Queen City. And then the Crescent adopted that name as well. But later, that was in 1870. In 1915, we had the real Gypsy Queen of North America, who passed away near Meridian, and she's buried there. So there's another tag with the name, the Queen City.
Did those two folklore tale, or not, I guess they're both factual, but did those two fight against each other on which was the name of the, like which one the Queen City came from first, or is everybody in agreement that?
I think everybody is in agreement. A lot of people are not aware of that train race. So I try to tell that as often as I can. My mentors were two men. One was director of the local archives, and another man who had his grandmother buried in Rose Hill Cemetery. And they just picked me out of the crowd, I guess because I'm a storyteller, and they wanted me to help promote Rose Hill Cemetery, which we have pulled in now, the downtown history walk that I'm here talking about with you. But they taught me, and they suggested reference books, and now they've both passed away, and I really miss them. So what I know is what they taught me, and I just have all confidence that it's true. I have even on my own researched these various things, and what they told me is right on target in the research.
That goes to show why it's so important to, have these conversations, ask questions, learn from those that, know the stories that are passed down, or just the local history that may not be, black and white in a history or sort of textbook. Because I feel like all of our communities have these rich stories of how they developed or what was really going on. And it may not be, bullet pointed in a pamphlet somewhere, but they're important to know.
Oh, I know. Well, see, that's why we want the children to come out to our events, because, and we have a lot of children, a lot of young people, a lot of schools involved, where we can teach this documented history, because so much of what you read online or whatever is just fiction. It is not true about our community. So that is our aim. That's our mission. We are a nonprofit organization, and that is our mission to teach.
What's the name of your organization?
Rose Hill Company. Rose Hill Company.
And y'all have done that in leaps and bounds, Miss Annie, over the years of you coming and sharing about your different events here, good things. It feels like, the crowds are getting bigger. There's more interest. I also feel like Meridian's found a niche that other communities could learn from, which is how to share your story in a visual sort of format like you all do with, interactive events that you seem to do so well. I feel like it could be replicated because the stories would be different. Every community, they're similar. I mean, there are similarities for every startup city in 1860, but they're all different because they're different people.
Different people, and heartwarming and amazing and courageous. Mississippians are all that,
and some sad and tragic. Like
we tell that
the Gypsy
too.
Queen. Yeah. You tell all of that. I know this one's coming up, you said Saturday.
It is.
February the 11th. That's one day after the 163rd.
One day after,
birthday of Meridian. Is it your second?
It is our second. I have to tell you quickly about that. We had just finished.
Actually, that's a good pause. You can tell us quickly about it.
I will.
When we get back with
hold on to it.
Annie McKee, Mississippi's storyteller, coming up next. We're continuing our conversation with my favorite Mississippi storyteller, Miss Annie McKee. You've been at it for how many decades now?
Oh, my Lord, at least 3.
At least 3 decades now,
Yeah.
sharing the stories of our past, particularly your hometown there of Meridian, which you were so proud of. We did get a text. Curtin Tupelo wants to know, when are your Halloween, your cemetery tours that's usually around Halloween, which I know that's not what we're talking about today, but are those still coming up in October?
Absolutely. It's on your rack card there on the back, the one I gave you.
Saturday, September the 24th.
No, it's the 30th. Look at the other rack card.
Oh, the other one. There you go. Saturday, September the 30th,
Yes.
6 to 8. There you go. So it's not quite Halloween, but it's just prior.
We tell, some a little bit of scary stories in there, but it's not really geared towards Halloween. But it's sort of fun to be in a cemetery, at dusk.
Is it?
Yeah, sort of fun.
Dressed up like the dead? Not the living, the dead when they were living, not like the dead. But
one of the most interesting stories we have there at the cemetery is a young woman who wanted to be buried in her wedding dress.
I wouldn't fit.
Well, obviously she fit because the coffin that we use we use a coffin very narrow. So I had a job to find a young woman who was small enough to fit in the coffin, and then we had someone who loaned us a pink wedding dress because she died in 1906, so that would be appropriate. She wanted the bridesmaids there. She wanted the minister who had married them, her husband there, and a violinist. So I said, I'll never find a young woman who will lay in a coffin
in a pink wedding dress.
And a pink wedding dress after sundown in a cemetery. I had girls all over the place that wanted to do that. So we did it, and it was great.
Well, to get a little taste of what you guys put on at the type of productions, they can come out. They don't have to wait till September. They can come out this Saturday.
That's right.
The 11th, noon until 4 p.m. And it is a walking Meridian downtown history walk. I think that's important because you get out and you get to see the city. Was that intentional?
Oh, yes, it is intentional. Actually, Meridian is growing, and we have so many arts centers and entertainment and things like we do. And so we sort of take a tour through town. And as we walk from the city hall to the courthouse with this tour, we're seeing the things at the Max that are coming up there. We're seeing things at MSU Riley and other Jimmy Rogers Festival, different things that are coming up. Our attendees will be able to observe as they walk along from place to place. So we are promoting different things that are coming up in our community.
Last year, Miss Annie, you guys recorded over 1,000 attendees, and so that's not one big group, because that would be taking over downtown like a big mob. So how does it work? I mean, I know it's from noon to 4. I get that, but are there shifts? How's it set up?
They come in to Dumont Plaza, which is sort of the center of downtown, and pick up a map. I gave you a copy of the map, and the stops are numbered, and the stories are numbered, so they can follow that map and go wherever they'd like. They do not have to see all of the stories, maybe just the ones they like, but then they can go to all of them. And it's 3 long blocks, nice wide sidewalks, good walking. We will have volunteers there, guides who, if they get lost, and some people do, that will help out and give directions and help them to be able to see all of the stops.
So it is a self-guided tour. When you go to one of the 23 stops or 22 stops, then you have someone there from your organization that's dressed in period piece to share the story.
Exactly.
Got it. So it's like an interactive museum, but like in real time.
It's little vignettes.
Yeah.
We have props and things to go along with the story. And each stop is going to be, we try to keep it at 7 minutes, but I'm going to tell you, some of our storytellers are so into it, they maybe go over a little bit. But so, yeah, you can go wherever you'd like. There are 10 stories at Dumont Plaza. There are 4 stories at the courthouse, 4 stories at the city hall, and then there are 3 more stories in the area between Dumont and City Hall, and then we have Mr. Threefoot who tells his story.
Mr. Threefoot. I feel like he's a story in himself.
He is a story. You know, the Threefoot Hotel, a Marriott, that it was a beautiful building, built in the 20s. And so the hotel has renovated it. And they've got a sky high or an open restaurant up about, 12 stories. And you can see the city. It's just a beautiful, beautiful renovated hotel, and it's right there.
Feels like Meridian is a best kept secret for folks to come and just enjoy and visit and then learn all of this interesting history. Which story do you tell? Are you at a stop or are you out there helping?
Well, this year I'm not telling a story because I have to, this is my baby. I started this house, so I have to make sure everything is on par. So I'm not telling a story this year. I might another year because I'm full of them.
Well, I feel like it's just in your blood to get out there and do that. You talk about the volunteers and all that make this possible, which I think is often overlooked. I mean, it's not like this is a paying necessarily gig for them, and they put effort and work into learning the stories. How do you get your 20-something volunteers? Do they get to choose their story? Do you pick it for them? Are they practices?
The volunteers that are telling stories are all members of the Rose Hill Company. They're all members of our nonprofit. There's one story that is told by Stage 2 students who are teenagers. They're a theatrical group. They tell a certain story every year. And the other volunteers from schools and from our Naval Air Station will be guides. They'll have the orange vest, and they will go around to see if anyone needs help, if they're lost, and that type thing.
Are you always surprised, Miss Annie, when you come up with these crazy ideas for Meridian that folks just line up to help? I mean, because, you're asking a lot of folks, but it feels like everyone's just excited to be a part of it.
Oh, they are. I have volunteered most of my life with different groups, and I've never worked with such a super giving group of people. And we go to board meetings, and nobody wants to go home. We just do it. I have to cut the light out to get everybody to go home. Everybody wants to stay and talk about their stories and what they're planning and props and costumes. It's just amazing. So all of those storytellers are members of our storytelling group, our nonprofit. They're all members. They come out to board meetings and they support, we're advertising this week. So there's several of them going to different venues to advertise, and they help, get water and get snacks. And
where do they get their costumes and their props from? Because that can be interesting to find a pink wedding dress from the 1900s. Where are you locating some of your stuff?
We have a wonderful relationship with Meridian Little Theater, and we loaned them that they loaned us that dress. And then one time they were putting something on, and I had an antebellum dress that I loaned to them. So it's just hands crossing to help each other. That's where the pink dress came from. But most of our storytellers put together their own costumes.
Where does in the history, I see 1906 Tornado of Front Street by Greg Hatcher. So 1906, obviously 1900s. How far into Meridian's present day does the history walk go?
We go in 100 years, 1830 to 1930.
In 4 hours. 100 years in 4 hours. There's your hashtag for the day. So So that was intentional as well.
Oh yeah. All of this is planned out, and the deal is you don't have to stay for everything. Just go to what you really like, or either you can go to all of them. If you don't dwindle around, you can get to all of them and hear them. They're just.
Do you feel like some will have come last year and maybe hit a couple, and then they'll come back this year and hit the ones that they didn't? Are they the same, or did you give a little new spice?
We've added 4 stories that we didn't have last year because we did more research during the year, and maybe we could come out with something else. But I have heard from so many people who say, do the same thing you did last year. We want to come back, or maybe they'll say we didn't see everything. We want to come back. So we are doing just about, I'd say, 90% of what we did last year.
Well, we're going to come back, and Jeff in Oxford says storytelling is an art that is vanishing, and I believe that, so we're going to help revive it coming up next.
All right, I agree.
The Weather Channel. But you'll see we're continuing our conversation with Annie McKee. She's my favorite Mississippi storyteller.
Thank you.
And they're gearing up for their second annual Meridian Downtown History Walk. It's this Saturday from noon to 4, but it's just packed full of so many. Again, I say other communities should take what you guys are doing and replicate it, because these stories should be shared in the visual, fun, and entertaining and engaging way that you guys do. But talking about storytelling, I mean, it is if there was a calling on your life, Miss Annie, it was to be a storyteller. And you do it so well, and you're so passionate about preserving that art form. And so at what age did you just know, like, I've got to tell stories or I'm just not going to be able to be happy in life?
I believe it was in about the first grade.
So you were later in life.
Well, really, I'm sure I did a lot of talking when I was a little kid. I mean, I know I did. And that may have been stories, but when I began to form telling a story, my fellow the students there, we would gather around, and actually one of those students is still my good friend. We go to church together. We've been friends since we were 5 years old, and she is a storyteller too. So
y'all are a hoot together.
We're a hoot. We are a hoot. We have so much fun, and she has a part in this downtown tour. Brenda Stewart, and so yes, I guess it's been something that's been inside me a long, long time.
You said that storytelling is magical, but maybe it hadn't always been thought of as an actual art. That seems mind-boggling to me.
Well, when I first started over 25 years ago, it did not have the respect in the community of art. It did not have the respect of a true art form. Mm-hmm. And so I'm saying, well, look, after I've learned more and more about it, storytelling is the oldest art form known to man. It's
how we know anything.
Honestly. Before there were cave drawings, there were people sitting around the fire, families, friends, telling stories. It all started way back there. And so as a storyteller, there was a lull there for a while, maybe even 50 to 75 years. But by the time I was an adult and I went into it, and it's not because of me, but it's because people were getting interested again in stories. And it is a literary art. It's really an art. It's also, it could be called a visual art because you can see it. A lot of our stories, when people are in those wonderful costumes, and Mayor and Mrs. Dial are just something we should have a portrait of. Their costumes are so wonderful. But once the people are in the costumes and people come up to listen, that visual is so important. They can see what these people wore at that time and envision that being them. It's the most amazing, exciting thing, and children will never forget it. If you have them read a text about history, it'll just go out their ears. But seeing it and watching it, and we're little vignettes is what we are in the cemetery and this downtown, and kids really get into it.
Well, even with the best, it doesn't, even if you don't create the story, if you know the best storytellers to read the best children's books because they get animated, they go into character mode.
That's right.
Even if they're reading off the page, they get you sort of excited about it. And it's one where you could sit there and listen to someone share that for a while and get lost in it. And to me, I just can't imagine that never being considered a reputable art form. I mean, it's like theater for one.
It is. Well, I'll tell you a little story about I was called to a school, to a certain large class to tell some stories one day, and they were third graders, and these two little boys slid in on their bellies into class, and I thought, oh boy. But anyway, we began the story, and it was about Sam Dale. who was a early pioneer for Mississippi. And he's actually buried near where I live, Sam Dale. And he was a wild one. He did many things that it's just almost impossible to believe. He worked during the war of the Battle of New Orleans. He was part of that, and he brought pioneers and settlers into the area. He was a really amazing story. And I had little costumes to go along with it. I had a little vest and little hats and things. And those two little boys were the first ones up to get their costume. And then we acted it out. I had them up on the front of the room there. There was a little stage, and we acted it all out. And the kids got into it, and so then it was time for me to leave, and I was packing up, and the two little boys came to me and said, "What are we doing tomorrow, Mrs. McKee?"
Oh.
And I said, "Honey, I won't be here tomorrow." So see, that just alerted them, woke them up, and got them into a class that they were learning, but they didn't realize it because they were having so much fun.
And they just thought, it's a way to harness their energy into a positive way instead of trying to get them to just stay still and sort of listen, sort of involving them, into the story. What's your fate when you get called to a classroom or to somewhere to just tell stories, Miss Annie? What's your favorite story to tell?
Oh, the great Choctaw chief Pushmataha.
You went straight to it.
Oh yeah. He was an amazing. He was a gentleman. I have a big poster I had made of him in his Choctaw dress, and he stood 6'1" and had a bearing of a leader, and so his Choctaw area was here in Mississippi into Alabama, right here where we sit was the Choctaw Nation. I think I mentioned that earlier, but he loved his people. And when the pioneers and the settlers began to come in, he admired the things that the settlers had, that like a spinning wheel, and the lessons the children learned, and he wanted his people to have it. And in turn, he would send some of his young men out to help the settlers build their cabin, and they would show them how to plant crops in this area, and it was a back and forth friendship. And had it not been, we would have never survived. I'm talking about the settlers. And so he was a great man, and eventually, because he was such a good soldier, he joined up with the Battle of New Orleans, took his braves down, and maybe we would not have won if not he had not gone. But at the end of his life, he was called the Indian general. He was called a general. And so at the end of his life, he was up in Washington, D.C. in December, and it was cold and frigid and snowing, and anyway, he was there for his people. He wanted to some more things for their school, and he had pneumonia came upon him, and he died there in Washington. So he is buried in the Washington Congressional Cemetery. Now, I have a document, a copy of a document, handwritten, of a testimony about him and the things he did, by a newspaper man from North Mississippi. And there was a young Choctaw, 10 years old, and he observed all of these things about their life, and when trouble would come upon them and all these things. It's all written there. I have a copy of it. I think the original is probably in Montgomery Archives. I'm not sure, though. So I practically sleep with it under my pillow. Oh, my gosh. And I tell it from that document. So I love that one. Kids love it, too.
I can absolutely see why. And that's why, if you love that, there's so many more stories that will be told this Saturday there in downtown Meridian. How do we keep up with everything you're doing with your productions and then other upcoming events, Miss Annie?
We have a Facebook page, the Rose Hill Company. I think it's of storytellers. I believe that's how it is. And mine, I'm Annie B. McKee. You can look me up. I have a Facebook page, keep up with everything, and then there's another very popular one in Meridian that has everything. Is Queen City Social. Queen City Social. Just click on it, and I post everything on there too. So.
Well, I guess it's Friday is Meridian's 163rd
Yes.
birthday. She's looking good. She's doing great in her, I don't know what stage of life this would be, what phase of life. But Miss Annie, you looking great always too. Can't wait to have you back next year. I guess it'll be 164. We're just going to keep it.
100, and I may come back in May and talk about, if you have time, that storytelling conference, because it's going to be a big deal.
Oh, absolutely. You're always welcome back, Miss Annie.
Oh, thank you. It's going to bring storytellers together for the first time in a long time out there. And there are a few storytelling groups around in the state. I encourage you to come to this.
And you can find that, too, on your Facebook page as well. All right, y'all stick with us. We got a few more good things.